Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. We're in a very different location today. We're not in the School of Tea Studio, but we are in Tea Central. This is the home of Dilmah Tea. And right here behind me is where we taste every week 10,000 different teas. Teas that are described in catalogs like this. Now, this is 1 week of Ceylon tea that we taste every day. So today, we have a slightly different topic. It's about taste, but it's about taste for morning, afternoon, and evening. And why that's important and why we spend years thinking about what makes a breakfast tea is because tea is so infinite in its variety. Now we're going to have a look at 4 teas to start. The first, we're starting in Nurelia. It's 6,000 feet above sea level. It's 18 to 19 degrees by day. Even right now, when it's not particularly cool down here in Colombo, it comes down to 10, 11 degrees, sometimes a little less, even 5 degrees a few weeks ago, even close to 0 in the night. So it's got a big diurnal range. And it is Camellia sinensis, but it's Camellia sinensis that produces light, bright, beautifully aromatic teas. And that's what I have right here. So if, Asanka, if you can bring it in on this. So you see this light color. It's a little dark, it's dark golden, but it's very different to the other teas that you see here. So here you have a tea from Nurelia. Here you have a tea from the Dimbula Valley. And here you have a tea a little further down and the southern parts of the Nawalapitia region. And here you have a tea from south of Ratnapura. Elevation is the difference, wind condition, temperatures, and so on. And they make 4 dramatically different teas. So I'm going to taste them. So excuse me because I can't share the taste with you. And I'm going to show you something about tasting as well. You know why tea tasters make that noise? Because we don't only taste with our tongue. Those of you who taste wine would obviously know that. You also taste with your brain. So when you slurp, you get much better resolution on the tea. But that's not the point of today's session. It's about the lightness, the brightness in this tea. It's about the more intensity. So here you have, from the Dimbula Valley, you have more structure. So what you've done, you've literally 45 minutes to an hour by car from Nurelia. And those of you who have been to our tea country, you know that our roads aren't great because it's very mountainous and we still have more or less a similar road network to what we had from the time of when we were a colony. So here, a little south, a little lower in elevation, 1,500, 2,500 feet difference. So you're at 4,000 feet above sea level, and you've got woodiness, you've got more intensity, dramatically different to what you see here. So what you see on the eye, what you experience on the nose, and what you taste on the palate in tea are aligned. So you can pretty much see what you're going to taste here. And then you come down to something even more earthy, more structured. Earthy, completely different. And then you come finally to intensity, bitterness, bitter chocolate, bitterness in a pleasant way. Beyond earthiness, it's stewed fruit, and it's all the same plant. So what is it about tea that delivers all of this? Well, it's nature. And that's the beauty. And that's why we wanted to have this session, because what we do here is we try to decipher the tea that's best for your morning, your afternoon, and your evening. Now, typically, most people in the morning, they love a strong tea, something that is strong and gives you that energy and that great shot to wake up in the morning. And what makes a breakfast tea a great breakfast tea or a morning tea a really good one? Well, usually for most people, it's strength, it's intensity and brightness. But where that must come from is not from any additive, it should come from nature. And you know, that's the beauty about tea, because how tea is crafted, we've talked about the influence of nature before, but how tea is crafted is the influence of the wind conditions, of the humidity of the soils, on the enzymes within the leaf. It's a metabolic system within tea. It is the hand picking. It's a time of picking. Early morning, we pick to make sure the tea plant hasn't started, that its metabolic processes haven't begun. And so all of these specific artisanal traditions that are so cherished by us, are so important to making a perfect cup of tea. So now we're going to look at a few teas. Before that, I'm going to ask you a question. Gary, if you can run the first question. We want to know something from you. We'd like to know, what do you like in a beverage in the morning? So we've put a few different choices. I have a few friends in Italy, and I have to confess they are coffee drinkers. They are still my friends, but they need their ristretto or their espresso in the morning. They love something strong and bright. But yet, in tea, we have the possibility to deliver that. And we have the possibility using what you have here. It's just a question of choosing the right tea for morning, for afternoon, and evening. And you know, for us, of course, as a family that loves tea, tea is perfectly paired to every aspect of life. But today's session is also about looking at different teas to understand how to taste. So we've got the questions up. We've got, yes, okay, most of you like a strong, intense taste. Well, what I'm hoping that at the end of this session we'll be able to show you is that there are different teas for different occasions. And that difference should not come from additives or whatever. Of course, you can add your honey, you can add mint leaves, you can add ginger, cinnamon, and so many beautiful things. Depending where you live, you could grow your garden mint, and you could add your mint from the garden to enhance the tea. But the most important thing about tea is to keep it natural, because it is a natural herb with incredible natural goodness. And so you should never compromise the goodness for the taste. So our session today is about that. So taking what you have told me into consideration, we're going to have a taste. We're going to have a look at a couple of teas. So we're going to start with what we refer to as our premium tea. Now, this is a tea from a little bit south of the Dilmah Valley. It has certain intensity. It has brightness. It's a brilliant tea for everyday consumption. And then we're going to have a look at our English breakfast tea. Now, this is a tea. It's a tea from the Dilmah Valley. It's the home of English breakfast. And you know how they all began? Very simple. You know, they say that some of the greatest traditions, it begins with a simple human need. Well, that's so in this case, because the Scottish and English planters back in the day, in the 1800s, when the tea industry was born, they woke up to the bracing 10, 12 degrees that it was in the Dilmah Valley and even beyond in Nuwara. And of course, they wanted to keep themselves warm. So you go out to muster, typically in a tea estate, at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And so it's not very pleasant at that time because it is freezing, take my word for it. And at that time, you need a strong, bright tea. And that is how this breakfast tea tradition started. It began as a Scottish breakfast. It evolved into an English breakfast. And today we refer to it as a breakfast tea because that's exactly what you've just told us. You want something that is strong and bright. So, caressed by the winds, by the relative humidity in the Dilmah Valley, you have here a strong, bright tea. But the importance is that as the day wears on, we like something a little bit different. And so there, we might look to a high elevation. We might look to a tea that is softer. And I'd be interested. I don't think we have that question for you today, but we do want to ask you what your preferences later in the day are. So we've got another question. It sounds a little complicated, so I'm going to give you a minute for this. Do you like tea in the morning and coffee later, or do you like coffee in the morning and tea later? Do you like herbs all day if you like something completely caffeine-free, or tea and coffee all day, or are you totally tea? Because there's a tea for every mood and every occasion. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Now, Earl Grey, next to this English breakfast that we just tasted, I'll just put our premium tea back. Earl Grey is the second most popular tea on the planet. And what is Earl Grey? Well, it's a tea that is strong. It should have strength and intensity. It's a tea that should have a citrus note. It's a tea that should resemble a slightly sweet orange, that is the bergamot. And it's a tea that should be perfectly balanced. You know, when you produce a flavored tea, sometimes we taste a flavored, if we do, well, like our Earl Grey, we would taste this 1,000 times every year, simply to make sure that the tea is harmonized. And when I talk about harmonized, I mean that when you add a citrus, slightly sweet flavor to a tea to produce an Earl Grey, you need to make sure that the tea balances it, because you must remember that harmony is the essence, it's gastronomy. The essence of gastronomy is about harmony on the palate. So when you combine something with tea, you take something away from the tea. And so you need to make sure that the ingredients are respectful of each other. And that's a perfect Earl Grey. And so we have the answers. So coffee in the morning and tea later. That's pretty much what we hear from around the world. So we'll, Gary, if you can share those results, because lots of people want a pick-me-up, something strong in the morning, and so an espresso, and we will forgive you. But we are talking about different types of tea today. So we're trying to see if you're a teetotaler or if you like to start your day with tea, what kind of tea is good for you? Well, it's a tea that is made by nature. And a tea that is made by nature in any of these areas, so from 4,000 feet all the way down to sea level, has intensity. But the difference, so here we've tried our Dilmah Valley tea, we've tried our Earl Grey, and the Earl Grey is based very much on a tea from the Ratnapura district. Why? Simply because at 2,000 feet above sea level, intensity, strength, that earthiness, because you need to have the harmony, you need to have the ingredients balancing. And then you come further down and the earthiness is compounded by bitterness. Now, what does that remind me of? 78% chocolate, of a dark chocolate. It reminds you of figs. It reminds you of so many different types of food. It could be the caramelization on steak and works incredibly well together, whether it is cheese or meats or desserts. But we have a session coming up on desserts and we'll be talking about that at that point. But for now, let's keep going. So lots of our viewers have talked to us about silver tips. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about silver tips because this is an extraordinary tea. So Asanka, if you can come in close on this. These are silver tips. Now, in a typical 2 leaves and bud that we handpick, you have in the middle, you have the bud. This is the bud only. It is extraordinarily aromatic. It has it has notes of hay. It has it's floral. It's complex, and so it's not just floral. It's not just green, but it is a complex aroma that together combines into this superlative liquid. You know, when you look at it, like I said, what you see on the eye is more or less what you have on the nose and also what you get on the palate. And so this is light. It's just literally like colored water. So any of you who like tea with their milk, this is not for you. But it is for someone who has a sophisticated palate, who would like to have the subtlety and the complexity that comes with a tea that is so artisanally made that from the moment it is handpicked on the leaf, actually even before, from the time the plant is in the nursery, we look after it. It's a particular cultivar, and it has a longer than normal bud. And this is literally exactly what you would see on the plant. This is the bud that would usually nestle in between the 2 leaves. And the lightness and the brightness are truly extraordinary. To this, you can add nothing. You can add neither blend it with a green tea, nor could you have it with anything other than something light. I think our recommendation at the School of Tea is a key lime pie, something gentle and citrusy, something soft, a panna cotta, perhaps a little white chocolate, but should be extremely high quality chocolate. And the reason is that when something is crafted by nature, one should never try to interfere with it. So blending is something that my father committed never to do. And that goes back a long time to the birth of Dilmah, simply because the characteristic of this breakfast tea The characteristic of our Earl Grey is based on the influence of nature, and that is what we as tea makers do, but we have more to cover. So let me return the Earl Grey with its beautiful citrusy, lightly sweet aroma. Return the English breakfast. And now, you know, a practical reason why tea and moods are so important and why we're discussing this session. Tea influences mood. Tea has a magical ingredient. It has caffeine, but about a third of the equivalent caffeine in coffee. But it has a magical ingredient that only tea has. It has L-theanine, which is known not only to reduce the stress hormone cortisol, it enhances mood, enhances alertness without the negative effects of caffeine. It enhances creative ability. And these are not my experiences. It's peer-reviewed science. So please have a look online at PubMed and read up on what L-theanine does. But beyond that is the fact that tea influences mood and mood influences productivity. There was a 2016 study in Wharton University, which talked about when you wake up in the morning, the next few moments in your day will determine the entirety of it. And so if you consider your breakfast tea, the importance of your breakfast tea is something that we take as something that is absolutely sacred, because your morning, your start to the day will determine the rest of the day. If you have a bad morning, unfortunately, the day is pretty much likely to be bad. But if you have a great morning, you're likely to have a great day. And so your breakfast tea is critically important to us. But then there's other occasions in the day. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about flavored tea. Now here, you have a strawberry tea. I'll tell you what I'm doing with this, because we're also talking about how to appreciate the taste in tea. Now, you can probably see this. This is called the infusion. We call it the infusion, but it's actually the infusion of the leaf. Once the tea is brewed, we take the leaves, and this is it. So let me show you the difference in them. So you see well, this is easier to see. This is a green tea. This is a black tea. Now, this is a black tea from approximately 5,000 feet above sea level. It has intensity and strength. The hue and the color, the copperiness of the infusion gives us, with almost a 30 to 40% degree of accuracy, an indication of what the tea is going to taste like. And so I know that this is going to be a light tea because I've got certain brightness and certain greenishness in my infusion. I'm sorry if you don't see it. Maybe the light isn't good enough, and possibly we're not broadcasting at a high enough resolution. But that's exactly what you need for a strawberry infused tea. So you take natural flavor and you combine it with a tea from 5,000 feet elevation, so that that the two respect each other. Because strawberry is light, of course it's fruity. It has certain light berry-like characteristics. In combination, a light, bright tea and the fruity sweetness, the aromas of strawberry, perfect in combination. Again, I can tell you, this is a tea that we first started offering way back. I think it would have been in the 1990s, and we taste it every single day to make sure that it's just right, just to make sure, because tea is natural and it varies constantly because of nature, with the sunshine, with the wind conditions and so on. So now we're going to move on to green tea. So if you look at mood and your different times of day, and considering the impact of tea on mood and the impact of mood on productivity, green tea would be that light, bright, relaxing component. So here you have green tea, and why it's so light. Here you see the difference. Why it's so light in comparison relative to a black tea is the fact that it is unfermented. Now, fermentation is what gives a tea its strength. So our low elevation tea is fermented, but so is our high elevation tea. Now, in this case, yes, it does have strength, but it's quite gentle. It's a little bit like an oolong. I want to show you what an oolong is all about. So we have our springtime oolong, which is, yes, right here, and a chamomile. Now, this springtime oolong is a lightly fermented tea. And in fact, here you have our high elevation tea and you have our oolong. Not exactly the same, but there are darker oolongs as well. So we're talking about tea for different occasions. So when you come into an afternoon, typically most people like something gentler, something a little relaxing, something to chill out with, because tea and L-theanine also enhances relaxation. I mentioned earlier that the antioxidants in tea, specifically ECGC, help in reducing the stress hormone of reducing cortisol. So it helps the body alleviate stress, but it also helps the body digest. It helps the body combat cholesterol. It helps the body synthesize sugars. And so there's a whole host of different benefits and a lot more, which we talked about in our session on tea and health. But tea for a different occasion. So now we've come into the afternoon. A lot depends on what you've had for lunch. So if you've had a heavy lunch, which I hope you don't do on a working day, but let's assume it's a Saturday. We've had an incredible, well, out here, it's a rice and curry. Now, you know something? With rice and curry, and in Sri Lanka, we love our spices, we would have typically a spicy curry. My choice would be this. Why would that be? Simply because the chili would be elegantly embraced and subdued by the Earl Grey, by the bergamot of the sweetness. So you have something and you're on fire. The sweetness, the citrus notes, embrace, subdue, and eventually cleanse the palate, which is ultimately what you want after a dish so that you can go on to savoring the next. And so we're in the afternoon. We've had our lunch, we've taken our Earl Grey after our curry, and we're coming into the mid-afternoon. So what are we going to do there? We're having a light cake. Assume that we're in an office a little bit like this, where some of our people are relaxed, some are quite stressed out, but assume you're one of the relaxed people, like Gary back there. He's having a light butter cake, and he's enjoying that. He's looking for a tea to help balance the sweetness, to help emulsify the fats, and to make sure that that doesn't have a bad effect on his body. Well, of these four, which would you choose? Logically, a light butter cake with a light tea, and that would be right here, our ranwata, high elevation tea. And the important thing to remember, and why tea with your light butter cake? Because the tea, not only because of its temperature, but also its characteristics, its antioxidants and so on, it brings out the flavor of the food. So when I say tea paired with life, it is tea paired in every sense with food, with beverage, with different moments, different occasions, tea for morning, tea for afternoon, but also tea for health. And so, and then perhaps I look a little bit further, and Asanka, who's on camera 2 here, decides that he wants a chocolate cake. Let's assume that, let's hope that it's a half day and he's not supposed to be working that afternoon. He's got a big chocolate cake. And what would you pair with that? Well, you need something that is going to catch the flavor, that's going to enhance the cake, that's going to bring out the texture and enhance the appreciation or the texture on the tongue. You wouldn't go for your Norelia there. You would probably not go for your Dimbula either, but you probably would go for your Nawalapitia. The earthiness would perfectly balance. Why? Because you need harmony. Strong chocolate cake, strong tea. And then there's Suren Loves Chocolates, or Naomi, same thing. They've got their Lindt 78% chocolate. Samples arrived last week. They've disappeared. So let's assume that Naomi's been into the product samples, and she eats that. And what happens when you take the Yatawata? Perfect balance, perfect harmony, because the intensity of the tea balances the intensity of the chocolate. On the first sip, it brings out the texture, brings out the texture of the chocolate, brings out the flavors, and eventually on the second sip, it completely cleanses the palate. But we've got a couple more teas that we're going to have a look at. Green tea, you know, now this is important for tea and your different occasions. Now, what we have here in our Moroccan mint green tea is a combination of green tea and mint. It's a tradition from Morocco, but it's not exactly Moroccan mint green tea, because in Morocco, they take their green tea with a lot of sugar. And sugar, you know, processed sugar particularly, is not good for you. And so we have fresh mint leaves, peppermint leaves combined with green tea, and the combination is absolutely ecstatic. So what the menthol in there does from the mint leaves, it relaxes the muscles, relaxes the digestive system, and the tea, it emulsifies the fats and helps balance or synthesize the sugars. And so in combination, it's a spectacular after meal tea, after lunch, perhaps not after breakfast. But the principle that I'm trying to share with you here in terms of a tea for morning, afternoon, and evening is that based on the natural characteristics of each tea, whether it's a breakfast tea or an Earl Grey, there is a taste harmony with different occasions. It could be the fact that, as you told us, that you enjoy tea that is strong in the morning and light in the afternoon, or it could be the fact that you're having your cake. You know, we have in Sri Lanka something called love cake. It is sinful. It is loaded with almonds and cashews and all sorts of stuff. My wife makes an amazing love cake, and it is fantastic. But afterwards, 10 minutes afterwards, you feel great. But an hour later, you don't feel so great. And that's where tea comes in. Because once you've had your love cake, perhaps with your love cake, as have been practiced by the Chinese for centuries, you have your tea, you combine it so that you enhance the flavor, so you deliver the taste, you enhance the indulgence because you're experiencing more flavor and more aroma. And then you use that ECGC, that antioxidant potential or benefit in the tea to enhance the digestion, to help your body digest, to separate the fats from the good stuff. And so I think possibly coming to, oh, we've got a final question. Gary, what's our final question? We have, yes, I think let's put that up. Why drink tea? Yeah, I'm interested to know, why do you drink tea? And we're saying it could be taste. Is it taste? Is it habit? Is it health? No particular reason, or you don't drink tea? You know, those three people who've chosen the last, you're really breaking my heart, but I'm glad you've been honest. Wonderful. So most people are going for taste, habit, and health. Great. Gary, maybe you can share that. Wonderful. So it is taste that has won. So what I want to encourage you to do, you know, the School of Tea and everything that my family does in tea, my reason my father started in tea in the first place and invited the world to try it, well, it's taste. It's about the pleasure in tea. But what we want to share with you today is that the fact that the pleasure is enhanced by the fact that there is a tea for every mood, there is a tea for every occasion, there are special occasion teas, there are prized teas that go with particular moments of indulgence. There are teas. I mean, imagine the indulgence of knowing that someone on 20 separate occasions has picked these buds for you, knowing that only 200 grams of these buds can be picked by a single person in a day. But there is equally similar indulgence in knowing that in every cup of tea, there are 30, well, we don't use the industrial method. We are a traditional orthodox tea company, and therefore every cup of Dilmah, there are the equivalent of 30 hand-picked leaves and bud. And so that, by any yardstick, is a measure of 21st century luxury. And so that's essentially what you get in tea. And so beyond the taste, beyond the pleasure, there is a functional aspect of tea, whether it is looking at mitigating stress, whether it is looking at enhancing your body's immune system, its ability to fight viruses, or whatever it is. There's so many different reasons. And one very palpable one, that research suggests that tea helps enhance lifespan. And why is that? Because tea combats dementia, combats cardiovascular disease, combats osteoporosis. The list is endless, and we dealt with it before. But yes, before I finish, infusions. We didn't talk about infusions, but infusions, this is ours. It's a moringa with chili, cocoa, and cardamom. Now, infusions aren't tea. Everything we've been talking about so far, it's about the leaf of the plant Camellia sinensis. And the magic in that leaf is not simply its L-theanine, its ECGC, or its antioxidant content. It's a fact that that same leaf grown at 6,000 feet elevation produces your light, beautiful golden tea. Grown at sea level produces your intense, slightly bitterness, slightly bitter earthiness. No, it's these are 4 teas, but on these counters behind me, each week we taste 10,000 different teas with approximately 4,000 different terroirs. And that's the magic in tea. But in fusions, there's something completely different because you have everything from peppermint. Peppermint is fabulous because it's got the menthol that helps you digest. Chamomile is beautiful because it's got the aroma. In our case, it's a chamomile flower. It's delicate, it's gentle, it's floral, it's magnificent, and it's caffeine-free. But caffeine in itself isn't something you should worry about unless you're medically sensitive to caffeine. And the caffeine in tea is a third, approximately, of what it is in coffee. But infusions are all naturally caffeine-free, but unfortunately, they lack the unique, natural goodness that is in the antioxidants in real tea. And remember what Dr. Tis Amarakon mentioned to us? A serving of tea or a cup of tea equivalent to 4 servings of vegetables. Any of you who don't like broccoli, I'm sure you're with me in saying, let's say cheers to tea. So I hope we were able to share something interesting with you. I'd really like to ask you, let us know, come on the Tea Club, and let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you. You know, so many people have written to us about their journey in tea. And these sessions are all about sharing our passion and our love for tea. And I have a whole team here who have joined me in this mission. But what we want to do is to make sure that we answer the questions that you have and we help you along your journey. So come on to the Tea Club. We're on Facebook only for the moment, but we will go wider onto LinkedIn and others. Come and tell us what you'd like to hear next. We have a full program. And next, Naomi, what do we have next? Is episode 3 will be exploring plant-based immunity. That's going to be a good one because it's also about health. It's about strengthening your immune system, and we all need a strong immune system. Thank you very much. From tomorrow, have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for watching.